So I just go back to some of our questions that, Paula and I developed. I think about, how we have changed as leaders and educators. But I go back to this idea of new members of the team or new administrations, whether it's in Croatia or the US, and how that can really change education. In many ways, I think accountability is an okay thing. I can remember when I first took my first assistant principal position, you know, classroom walkthroughs by administrators weren't something that people did. Teachers taught and no one ever saw the great things that they were doing. And I think flipping that from an accountability measure to something that really can improve instruction. And so you can say, boy, Shady can really do a nice job with student writing. You should go see him teach. Sharing that wisdom is something that's so important for our new members. So I just wondered if people talk about, the changing dynamic, both in, because I don't want to harbor on, I think we could talk all day about bureaucracies, but I want to continue to think about our questions with regard to new members. So again, points well taken. I don't know if people want to just share out about thinking about how things change when you bring in those new members and you establish those norms. What other pieces are people seeing?
It's sometimes difficult for me to explain to new teachers what our methods that we're well known by includes, what is included in it, because there's so much psychology behind the approach to students. Then there's of course what has to be what learning targets have to be met for every single class. But I think at least I hope that my first stress is in the first interview, in the first conversation, is the importance of relationship in our team, because it all comes down to relationships. If there's one person that's toxic, there's a chain reaction with people trying to avoid that person, then forming small groups that chat in between them, then the stories are stuck in that room and that person is isolated and cannot move from that position. So most of my work is really zigzagging between everyone and helping them zigzag from one classroom to another. Even an English teacher goes to a German teacher's class because it's all about the relationship with the students. And then there's this relationship with parents. I help them, I coach them how to deal with difficult conversation, because that's usually the biggest fear with all the teachers. And there are a few pretty efficient steps that you can give people as, go to a place when they're not prepared for the conversation, when a parent just shows up, because it sometimes happens in our school. But yeah, it all comes down to relationships. And I have to say that my radar is always on for one sentence that was said by someone and can be taken in the wrong way by somebody else. And then I have very private conversation, not too long, a few minutes of a conversation with that teacher, saying, okay, if the situation was just a little bit different, this could have been taken personally, and you would have made and be responsible for the first bad step in your relationship. And we cannot have that. So this is what you can do in the future. My teachers definitely have to get used to me being so open about it. That's one thing that's not negotiable. They have to be able to take it, but I hope they are aware that I'm just as open for their feedback on my steps towards them and in the classroom, because you always get used to your own ways with students, your own ways with parents. And then I have so many things on my mind besides the classes, but I don't teach many of them anymore now. So it's useful for me to go and see somebody else's ideas. Definitely, new teachers bring fresh ideas, and it did stir everything up in the best possible way this year. And reflecting on Shadi's, we are so annoyed by Croatian public schools, because we try to collaborate and establish some kind of collaboration with them. We do in a way because we rent out classroom spaces from them, and everybody knows us. We've been here. We are the oldest language school in Croatia. We've been here this is our 30th year, and we have around 500 students every year. And it's very frustrating that you cannot find a single teacher that wants to come join our classroom, talk to our students. The moment you offer something like that, they feel exposed. In order to help to make space for my teachers to get ready for that kind of involvement in at least each other's classrooms. And I hope with Paul's school, Paul, we have a lot to talk today. A lot to talk about today at Kathy's gin and tonic party. And so I hope, to make room for my teachers to get ready for that kind of exposure by cutting down our administration to the least possible amount. But I have the freedom to do that. I'm literally responsible to myself and to my parents only, which is,
I think it's really important too.
It's a wonderful position to be in, by the way.
I'm sorry.
No, okay.
I think it's really important when you're bringing new people onto a team to realize that any new member of a team is a new manifestation of that team. And so you need to go back to whatever the norms are that you have established. We work with Garmston's norms, 7 norms of collaboration. And I think going back each time and revisiting it, even having it on the top or the bottom of your minute schedule for meetings is really important to say, this is what we believe in how teams interact. But to actually define what the work of teams should be within the school. So as people move in and out, as that transition happens, and in international schools around the world, it's naturally a very dynamic place. People come and go almost every year. So nearly every year you have new teams. What's worked very well for me has been the DeFore model of professional learning communities at work. And we have as the center of all our collaboration times, those 4 questions. And we keep coming back to the same 4 questions every time there's a meeting. What is it we want students to learn? How do we know when they've learned it? What do we do if they haven't learned it? And what do we do if we already know it, if they already know it? So we're giving a very loose kind of structure to our teamwork. There are certain things within the school that we remain and we commit to as being tight. We need to have collaboration meetings. At the collaboration meetings, you need to have student work. So in order to have a student work in front of you, you need certain sorts of data. So we are very tight on some things, but we're loose on the other things. And that's the science and art of teaching. We want conversations to happen around those 4 questions. What do we want kids to know? How do we know that they're going to do it? What do we do if they know it already? And what if we do if they don't? And if we can break down the team meetings to those things, we have our established norms of communication. At least that gives some sort of scaffold to teachers moving in and out of teams, where we're establishing a culture of this is the way we talk to each other. These are the things that we talk about. But again, every time we have a new member of a team, it's a new team. And we have to go back to that forming and the storming stages of those teams. And in an international school, when it changes every year, 1 or 2, 3 people to a new team every year, we're going back relentlessly to the same point. But if we have it at the core, what is it we want our kids to know and how do we know they've got it, then that makes it a little more solidified.
That's great stuff, Paul. That is really great stuff. I think, and Ned was a middle school guy, and I think that a big part of relationships, and like Vlatka was saying, is intentionality and the structures. And I think that's a leadership function in a school as well. We talk about the importance of relationships, but I think we need to, with the same intentionality that you have, Paul, we have to ask ourselves, what do I have set up so that those relationships take place? It works well in a middle school because we do have interdisciplinary teams of teachers who work around the same group of 110 kids. So they have common planning time every day. That's one of the ways, Paul, that we do sort of design those teams. I don't think I have as my team turnover is not as significant as what you described, but we will sometimes sort of jigger those teams a bit to tweak the culture in the school by maybe switching someone to 8th grade from 7th grade, or just switching teams within grades, and that can have an impact on culture. Another thing, of course, I'm sure like many of you, I have new teacher orientation for my new team to sort of induct them into the culture of the school. And then, thanks, Ned. As a leader, I think it also has to be about intentionality. You know, if I'm committed to relationships, and I have to be intentional. Now, I have a pretty big staff. I think I've got about 75, not just teachers, but aides and clerical. If I count aides and clericals, I have over 100 people in my school. So intentionality means that I'm not just spending my whole day with the 10 people who give me the greatest comfort and just the people I like to hang around with. I need to be intentional every day about having 5 or 6 conversations with someone who needs me to touch base with them, or who I just don't touch base with enough. And I keep a checklist of people, so I know that I'm having those kinds of that kind of contact. So I think it's a leadership. I think what sometimes we don't pay enough attention to is that relationships is a leadership function, and we have to look at, if we say we're committed to relationships, then we have to answer the question, what do I have in place in my school and in our school culture that promotes relationships? I think all of us have to answer that question. And it's not enough to just say, well, folks kind of connect in the workroom. They do, but I think they tend to connect along very familiar lines, and the same patterns just repeat themselves. So how do I make sure that people are crossing disciplines, within that group of 70 teachers I've got? How do I make sure that they're, connecting with each other in unfamiliar ways?
So I want to pile on that, if I could, for just a minute. And that is that I think one of the key functions of leaders is you have to be courageous. You have to be able to step into places that you're maybe not as comfortable going to. Like you said, don't just hang out with the people that make you feel good or that have the same beliefs as you have, because everyone on your team is coming from a different place, and every day they have different experiences coming into the school. So it's being attuned to what's going on in the school, being willing to step up, go have those courageous conversations. And courageous conversations can be just, I notice that you are, by yourself a lot. And, we really believe in supporting each other in everything that's going on, and, providing resources to people when you know that they're struggling with something, whether it be personal or professional. But just having that pulse on your school, on your staff, and making sure that you're doing the thing that's demonstrating what you want the school to be like, and then encouraging people to step up to the norms that you've created.